Today on The Communicative Leader, we're chatting about compassionate leadership with Maria Arpa. Maria is a leading expert in workplace dynamics and compassionate communication, and she uses this approach to transform the way organizations address conflict and build relationships. She believes in creating workplace communities that transcend traditional hierarchies and embrace diverse cultures, belief systems, and generational differences. Her innovative dialogue roadmap facilitates heart-centered communication. It reduces unnecessary suffering, fosters mutual respect, and this is what helps make her a sought-after advisor for senior management and C-suite executives. Folks, I learned so much and had such a great time in this conversation, and I know that you will too. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to The Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah O'Million Hodges. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On The Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. Thanks for joining us today on The Communicative Leader, Maria. I'm really excited to learn more about your take on compassionate communication and, of course, compassionate leadership. Can you give us a little bit of your background and what led you to where you are today, an expert in compassionate leadership?
Thank you. Yes, it's a really interesting question because I've done so many things, and sometimes you can only answer that question really looking back and in the moment. So in the moment, what really comes up for me in the times we're living in is thinking back to being a child of immigrant parents who were completely traumatized by World War II. So my family are Maltese, and not many people know that even today Malta stands as the most bombed place of anywhere that's ever been bombed in the world during World War II. And my mother was a teenager during that. My father, there's a whole nother story. My father was 30 years older than my mum, but and they didn't meet in Malta. But it was only when I probably got to the age of about 50, I realised that my mum actually had complex PTSD. And she was nobody's victim. I mean, my mum could start a fight with air. I mean, literally. And in some ways, it was funny because back then I was uneducated. It was also incredibly frightening to watch my mum picking fights with people as a child. And of course, it's your normal. When you grow up, it's your normal. So I think if I reach right back, knowing somehow that something wasn't right about the way we lived, and then over time into my own adulthood, looking at what I was repeating, asking better quality questions, going into my own therapy, and then realising that there is a way that we are in this world that I call, it's not my title, but I call it domination culture. There is a programming or an indoctrination of hierarchy, of punishment, of everybody knowing their place, of implied threat in our systems. And something in me said, I think as humans we can do better. And there are examples of that.
Yeah, excellent. How powerful, Maria. Thank you for doing this work that you do. We were just saying before we started recording that incivility in the workplace, among all of these other counterproductive and just destructive behaviors, have been continuing to rise. So taking a compassionate leadership approach, I think, and modeling that is going to go a long way in changing some of these norms.
And interestingly enough, there's a necessity for this change.
Yes.
Because those old systems of know your place and secrecy around, things that go on, the dark stuff in the shadows, that people are being called on to speak up about these things.
Yeah.
And so that superficial layer of ethics and morality that, we all had to pretend was the way we were all living, when actually underneath it all sorts of stuff was going on. It's all being exposed.
Yes.
People are being encouraged to talk. And of course, when we encourage people to say what they've been through, then they don't want to put up with it anymore. So, even if I was not in a compassionate heart space, there's a kind of intelligence that says we are actually now going to need to do things differently.
Yes. Yes. And how wonderful that you're here, bringing in this new view. So with that, Maria, I was getting ready for our conversation, and I was just thinking about, what does compassionate leadership mean to you? And then how does it differ from kind of other common approaches that we kind of grew up learning about in terms of leadership?
Thank you. Yes, it's a really good question, because the word compassion, has so many connotations. I mean, if you take a sort of dictionary approach to it, I think it comes from compati, the Latin, which means to suffer with. And so, that's not the extent of the place I want to go to. But there's something in to suffer with, which for me means accepting our common humanity as the starting point, accepting our fallibility, accepting that imperfect is perfect, accepting that nobody has all the answers, accepting that we're all, lurching from one crisis to another. We're all trying to do our best. Some of us are making a mess of it. Others are doing slightly better. And it's all part of the pot. It's all part of the mix. So compassionate leadership for me means an acceptance of our humanity and a starting point that says, actually, we need to begin with honesty and kindness and mercy.
Gosh,
and how that differs.
It's amazing. Yeah.
To other structures, is to think about hierarchical structures of leadership, which were really more based on the military. If you've life and death at stake, then you need someone to make a decision in the moment, and all the rest of it. But the idea that we absorb these ways into, workplaces has no sense in it whatsoever, unless you believe, this kind of industrial revolution stuff that, you took people off the fields and you trained them into being obedient and to operate to the clock and so you don't get your hands chopped off in the machine, but the other dark side of that was, telling people that they were indispensable because you broke the tasks down to such an extent that you took all the meaning out of everything. So you took the meaning out and you had, one person just doing that all day.
Yeah.
And they were replaceable. And so that kept a kind of power structure going. And although I know things have come a long way since then, well, maybe not, some people would argue. Yeah. There's still an underlying sense of that hierarchical thing that somehow, because I have additional responsibilities, I'm a better human being than you.
Yep. I can still feel that that kind of sense that comes with many titled leaders, and that idea that because they've gotten there, it means that they're a better person, not necessarily just the one who wanted the role or was a better fit for the role, not about their overall assessment of their character.
Or was in the right place at the right time with the right...
Bingo. Yes.
I don't like using the
word
right
friends
because it brings up all sorts of things, but, who do you know? Yeah. And also, we could get really deep into this, what trauma is someone working out by needing to have power over other people?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so that leads us, this is a really nice segue. So I was thinking then about the inspiration, and you shared your background with us, and you've kind of defined compassionate leadership in your own words. And I'm wondering, from kind of the background and your early professional experiences, kind of what led you to where you are now? We're saying that this compassionate leadership, this is the core of the way that I approach work and the way that I approach helping others do their work.
Um, so I've been on both sides of the coin, like feeling powerless, in my upbringing in the slums of London. And then, working my way out of that and running my own business and becoming, in my own little mini world, the powerful, if you like,
Mm-hmm.
and finding that none of that actually had, that was a spiritual desert. That there was nothing in there that would take me into community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've always had a long desire to feel that we're all part of something and that there is community. And so I started to understand, I got into conflict resolution and became a mediator, because I started to see that actually we're trained to fight each other.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know we've been trained to fight each other, but we have been trained to fight each other because all of our models of conversation are based on debate.
Mm-hmm.
And nowhere, you may have done English language where you learn the technical side of the language, and you may have learned English literature where you understood the art of the language. But where did you ever have a lesson in how to have a conversation, a heart-to-heart conversation with another human being,
Mm-hmm.
using language to meet each other in true human connection? So we had to pick that up and
Mm-hmm.
picked it up really badly using the debate model of conversation, in which
Yeah.
the idea is that one argument prevails over all others. So
Yeah.
as you're speaking, I'm preparing what I want to say in retaliation or defense.
Mm-hmm.
And this just doesn't work. So I started to understand that there's this need for us to, if I'm talking to you, then the biggest need for both of us in this moment is to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
That comes before anything else. Even if I'm calling 911 or 999, the need
Mm-hmm.
is to be heard.
Yes.
And we do so little of that. So I got into mediation. I loved it. And then I realised that mediation is still reactive, not proactive.
Mm-hmm.
We're still waiting for
Yeah.
the poop and the fan to make
Yeah.
contact, and then you're
Mm-hmm.
cleaning it up afterwards. And again, I come back to I feel and I've proved and I have seen that as humans we can do better. So
Mm-hmm.
I got into the idea of being more proactive around our compassion for each other, the way we talk to
Mm-hmm.
each other, the way that we see the world, the lens through which I'm looking has a huge part to play in the outcomes. And seeing that actually we could alleviate unnecessary human suffering. Because
Mm-hmm.
a certain amount of human suffering, right, is birth to
Yeah.
death, whatever.
Yeah.
But we create so much unnecessary human suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in
Yeah.
working to prevent that and working to heal it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating, Maria. Because when you were talking, I was thinking about how the traditional model, when many of us weren't taught to have these conversations and we're just modeling it on debate or a zero sum game, we go round and round. But if we learn how to take a more compassionate approach from the start and how to really listen and not just hear, that becomes a different cycle too, and a positive one that we want to see continuing.
Absolutely. And of course, that starts internally. I've got to learn to listen to myself.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I've got to listen to those voices.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. I still have voices that, from my childhood that would pop up and, could take an amazing experience and a few days later start telling me how rubbish it was.
Yeah.
Now I've learned to laugh at that.
Yep.
I've learned to go, you've got no place here in my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
You used to do that. And you used to make me believe that things that I'd experienced weren't what I thought they were. But actually, you're long retired.
Yep. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Like you're not driving anymore. Get out of the driver's seat. Yeah. So, Maria, with this, and you've kind of touched on these, but if you were to pull out, I don't know, 3 to 5, whatever you see, key principles of compassionate leadership that every leader should try to embrace and then model, kind of what's that on-ramp? What is that? What are those things that they can start thinking about in really tangible ways now to start changing their approach?
Oh, thank you. I love that question. So the first one is the one that everyone ignores, is where are you getting support? Where are you getting support? If you're a leader, you're supporting people. You cannot support people if you are not getting support. If you feel unsupported, you're rapidly heading into martyrdom. You head into martyrdom, everyone's going to smell it on you. Right? So the first thing is, where are you getting support? Now, interestingly enough, I was talking, this comes up a lot, when I'm mentoring people or working with people, I love to give, I love to support my people, I love to listen, I love to do this, that, and the other, and everything pushed outwards. And isn't that amazing? And isn't that wonderful? And always running around and giving people the shirt off your back if you have to, whatever. And one of the things that I always point out, or that I work with, is if you always give people the shirt off your back and you're always fixing everything and you're always running around making sure that everybody's okay, how are you giving your people the opportunity to show that they love you?
Yep.
You're actually depriving them of the opportunity to show you love and care.
Yep.
And for me, that's really important. Like we have everything in life is an exchange, give and receive, giving and receiving, giving and receiving, and those things have to be in balance. So that's the first thing, is about support and reciprocation of love. And then the next thing for me is about embodiment, learning to actually feel my feelings in my body. You cannot feel your feelings in your head. Even if you can tell people I'm angry or I'm sad or I'm upset, it's actually like it's an embodiment that goes down the body, and we need to make contact with our body, because that's where compassion comes from. And I'm particularly reminded of a gang leader that I worked with years ago. And I asked him, what this work had done for him, and how things had shifted in him working with me and us doing. We went on this big journey together. And what he said was, you taught me how to feel again. And when you feel for yourself and for others, and you can't hurt people.
Yep. Wow. Talk about powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Just amazing. And it was an amazing time, because I wanted to show him, he was in my local area, and I wanted to show him ways in which the gangs could have their sit downs and perhaps not murder each other, because it was all spilling out onto the streets. And he said, for every hour I spend learning your stuff, you have to spend an hour shadowing me and seeing what I have to put up with. And it was quite an amazing couple of years.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I learned some. He passed away during COVID, but I learned some amazing things from this man. Like, he was a
Mhm.
giant.
Mhm.
So, so that embodiment, learning to feel,
Mhm.
to and what that brings up, and then of course it's going to bring stuff up. So then you need support,
Yeah.
And then the other thing is use of language,
Mm.
And I would say that,
Mhm.
given the work I do, you would say that. But language is the software in our brains that we use to tell ourselves what to do. So if we're
Mm.
using a violent language internally, if we're using
Mhm.
the debate model internally, if our inner judge, our inner police officer is
Mhm.
active and our
Yeah.
inner mediator is gone to sleep,
Mhm.
we're going to have very different outcomes to how we use language and what people receive from us and what we
Mhm.
receive from ourselves. And then finally, a conscious awareness.
Mm.
And for me, that's vibrational. We can
Okay.
now, I'm a Reiki master, and I
Mhm.
never used to talk about it in
Excellent.
this field.
Mhm.
People thought you were some tree hugging lunatic.
Mm.
But now we can
That
talk.
is changing. Yeah.
Now
Yep.
I can talk about energy and that everything is
Excellent.
energy. Everything
Yep.
is vibrating, and we need to connect with those vibrations
Mhm.
and learn to read and sense and become more sensitive to the vibration
Mhm.
and learn how to master those vibrations. Those
Mhm.
things are really important.
And I imagine that ties in with the embodiment as well, because when you're able to feel those emotions and process them in healthy ways, then your body is more keen and open for sensing and connecting.
Yes, and you can rely less
Mhm.
on rational,
Mhm.
logical thinking, which is very tiring, very
Yes.
tiring. It has
Yep.
its place, but
Mhm.
the problem for me is that is running the show now.
Yep.
I worked in advertising years
Mhm.
ago when it wasn't a science, when
Mm. Mhm.
the creative team, got in a room with, bottles of alcohol and cigarettes, and sat up all night and did
Mhm.
a creative thing and came up with ideas and worked with clients in an energetic way.
Mhm.
Now it's become scientific,
Mhm.
and you lose something because
Yep.
you lose connection.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. Which is the heart of everything.
Isn't it?
Yep.
Absolutely.
So, Maria, you have this dialogue roadmap that I have learned with your work, and I was hoping that you could introduce us to this idea and help us to kind of see how we could apply this in our own lives.
Thank you. Yeah. So, as I said to you, what I realised is that the model of conversation that we've all learned, and it's how we entertain ourselves. It's in big
Mhm.
business. It's in our governments. It's everywhere you look. It's in our schools. Is a debate model of conversation, and at its worst, it's debate
Mhm.
plus enforcement. So,
Mhm.
debate plus enforcement is the most toxic version of that.
Yeah.
Um, So I started to realise that what we need is dialogue. And in dialogue, we understand that there isn't one argument that prevails,
Mhm.
that everyone's got a piece of the answer.
Yeah.
Um, and I was really very moved by Carl Rogers' work, Carl Rogers being the kind of inventor or developer of person centered
Mm.
therapy,
Mhm.
Marshall Rosenberg's work in nonviolent communication. And but then I started to look for what, how do you have a dialogue? And it didn't exist. There wasn't
Mm.
lots of people talking
Mhm.
about dialogue, but no kind of real how to manual. And
Yeah.
so that's what I've spent the last sort of 30 years creating, is a manual
Mhm.
on how to have a dialogue. And so the first difference is that A debate is, you're having a debate from your brain, you're having a debate in your head, and you're logicking out and you're weaponizing and you're looking for weakness and you're trying to get, what you want out there.
Yep.
And you may end up at some kind of compromise or whatever, but, essentially it's not a connected conversation. And in the dialogue roadmap, what I learned is there are 5 states of being.
Okay.
So this is not something I'm doing from the head, it's something I'm doing from my heart. This is part of the embodiment. And I'm using words to let you know the state that I am in, and not using words to get a result.
Okay.
And this is really important. So I'm using words, and in the training, we've got particular ways and reasons which we wouldn't go into in a podcast, but I'm letting you know that I am in the state of receiving. I am in the state of hearing you. And then I'm going to be in the state of curiosity or inquiry. It's a state of being. It's not an investigation. I am not a detective. Then another place, in another part of this conversation, I'm going to be in the state of empathy. And empathy is a state. And I use words to let you know I'm in that state. And I'd like you to join me in that state. So you can have empathy for yourself, or we can have empathy for each other, or we can have empathy for the state of the world, or the state of our team, or the state of our workplace, or the state of our family.
Yep.
And then, it's giving and receiving. So if I've been on a state of receive, then there's a point where I'm in the state of giving, where I want you to hear me. Now, I may have to do some work to prepare you to hear me. And then finally, we come to the state of support. What are we going to do about this? How are we going to do this? How will we know if it's worked? What will we do if it doesn't work? What happens if we don't know? And these are states of being. They're not, it's not a chess game.
Yep. Yes.
And my role as a facilitator is creating the conditions in which I can shift our debate into a dialogue, creating the conditions in which we can have that kind of conversation.
Yes. I found myself giggling when you're talking about a state of curiosity, because you're right. What traditionally happens then is rebuttal, right? The mental list making of what are the shortcomings? What are potential consequences? What is that we haven't already done? And curiosity seems like such a healthier and more helpful place to be in order, even if we're solving the biggest of problems or concerns, we're likely to have a lot more bandwidth to be innovative when we're coming from that place of curiosity than, kicking the tires and trying to chip away at someone's argument.
Yes, because one of the things that I find is that we're so avoidant of the whole feelings. We're talking about emotional intelligence and all of that, but I'm talking about the embodiment and the vibrations and the feeling of it. That what we do is when we go to fix things prematurely, what we're doing is we're actually being conflict avoidant. And the conflict is not really wanting to sit with the upset or the grief. One of the things I talk about is the grief of being human. Even if I'm having the best life imaginable, somewhere there's a counterbalance where some days, I forget which comedian it was, but somebody, I was listening to something, made me absolutely laugh. He said, and my doorbell went at 5:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning. And I thought, God, isn't it a pain being alive?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. There's so
So
much truth in that.
yeah. I just thought, it doesn't matter. There's always a sort of a grief or a downside or shadow
Mm-hmm.
work or, whatever it is. And
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing is learning to play in that sandbox.
Yep. Yep. Oh, I love that. So we've talked about this dialogue roadmap, and we've talked about embodiment and support in the shared space. And I love your use of we language. And that leads me to thinking about some contemporary executive leaders or those in the C-suite. What are some misconceptions that you have encountered that some individuals, especially in these highest ranks, have about compassionate leadership?
So the biggest misconception is that this in any way is soft or stretchy
Mm-hmm.
or unboundaried. And for a lot of people who've held things very tightly for a long time in their
Mm-hmm.
lives, it's a scary prospect of cutting that ribbon,
Yeah.
and allowing it, because there's so much backed up
Yeah.
that's going to flow. But that's your inner work. That's
Yeah.
not what I'm talking about. It's
Mm-hmm.
interesting, that I say the most compassionate thing I can do in a situation is tell people what the boundaries are and
Mm-hmm.
how they will be held accountable to those boundaries,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
not
I
wait for them
agree.
to fall over and then
Yeah.
punish them. But in our contracting,
Mm-hmm.
in the conversations where we're setting things up,
Mm-hmm.
in the conversations where we're in the middle of things, telling people what the boundaries are and the limits and the boundaries, whether they're fair or unfair.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole other, we could have a whole
Yep.
thesis on fairness,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not the point. For where we are now, with the resources that we have today
Mm-hmm.
and the investment that either of us or any of us are prepared to make into this situation, these are the boundaries. This is where we all stand in this.
Mm-hmm.
And, unless we're chaining people to the wall and giving them bread and water, we all have choices.
Yep. Yep.
But then, what I don't do is throw people away. What I
Mm-hmm.
want to do is work on their resistances.
Mm-hmm.
So if people have, and that's part of compassion. Part of compassion is
Yep.
understanding and working on the resistances. Because
Mm-hmm.
are those resistances real? Because it's about something inherently that isn't going to work in this
Mm-hmm.
situation, this moment, that I haven't thought of,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or is this somebody's stuff from other parts of their life that are
Mm-hmm.
coming into play?
Yep.
Well, I do that too. So
Mm-hmm.
we're all in this together. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, that's, a misconception is definitely the idea that compassion is stretchy and elastic
Mm-hmm.
and that you're going to lose control. Well, you
Yep.
are going to give up control,
Mm-hmm.
but you're giving up control in order to unburden yourself from having sole responsibility, because everyone's
Mm-hmm.
watching you and going, that ain't my problem.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's really, I love that idea of looking at boundaries as compassion. And it made me think of designing my syllabi for students. I've known as being very rigorous, but I'm telling them, this is how I show you I care. These are the things that you will need. These are our guardrails. Here are the expectations. So it's really helpful to have more of that language
Mm,
surrounding it. Because I could definitely take a much easier path for myself, and it wouldn't be as helpful for my students. So
yeah.
thank you, Maria. So let's think about impact and measuring success. So are there some either metrics or certain indicators that if someone's saying, hey, I've been trying to do this, how do I know if it's working?
So this, I'm sorry to laugh at the question.
No.
Um, on LinkedIn, I keep getting asked to contribute to this, that, and the other. You know, how does
Yep.
facilitating work? How does this work? How does that work?
Mm-hmm.
And I keep coming back to the same thing. You ask the people if it's working.
Mm-hmm.
The
I
idea
love
that I
that.
can kind of behind everyone's back
Mm-hmm.
measure something and
Yep.
hold up a PowerPoint presentation and a few
Mm-hmm.
graphs
Yep.
with some percentages on it, and the people
Mm-hmm.
themselves didn't tell me that. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, it's literally about the way we measure, the way I measure impact is literally to have regular check-ins,
Mm-hmm.
create the conditions in which people can actually tell me the truth.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
And that is missing in so many workplaces.
Yep. Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
who can tell the truth in most workplaces?
Almost no one without fear of repercussions, serious repercussions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so for me, you know, I mean, I work in the prison system, for
Mm-hmm.
example, and you know, someone coming into work, you know, may just want to say, "Oh God, I feel so unwell today," but you can't
Mm-hmm.
say that
Yep.
because someone's going to write it down and hold it against you. But you
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to that's what compassion is about. I want to be able to say, "Oh, I feel like crap today."
Yep.
Doesn't mean I can't do my job. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean I'm
Yeah.
not going to put my right head on. Nobody has
Mm-hmm.
to panic.
Yep. Yep. That's right. I think that's so important because I think we have been conditioned for so long that if I came in and said, like, it's just not my day, look, it
Yeah,
is all wrong, then it would be seen as an emergency. Like it would
yeah.
be like a clear cry for help. And like, no, maybe just the alarm didn't go off and the kids were having a moment, which meant I had a moment. And yeah, but you're right. It wouldn't mean I couldn't necessarily teach my content or have a conversation and be fully engaged. It would just be nice to unload and
Wouldn't
unburden
it? Wouldn't that be
before.
lovely? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I have in you know, in my workplace, I've got a
Mm-hmm.
few people, and what we've, you know, you can probably tell I'm not like a shrinking violet. You know, I've kind of got quite a big person. I mean, this work's been really great for me because
Mm-hmm.
the opposite of most people, it's shown me what I miss in being larger than life. Where it's
Mm-hmm.
helped me to kind of pull back. Um, but you know, the whole point of this for me isn't so that we tread on eggshells and we're all lovely and compassionate with each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's so that I can build enough trust and demonstrate that the trust, you know, materializes into real things
Mm-hmm.
so that we can speak in shorthand to each other and nobody
Yeah.
gets upset.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we're seeing real change in the
Yeah.
workplace, right? So for those who want to think about outcomes and retention and satisfaction, they're likely going to see increases in all of those areas.
Well, the whole point is, you know, people, I'm not saying anything new, you know, people don't leave
Mm-hmm.
bad jobs, they leave bad managers.
Yep.
But, you know, the whole point is if we're spending so much time in a workplace and with people that we didn't necessarily choose,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we need to believe that there's some authenticity. You know, there's
Yep.
got to be some level of fairness. And if
Mm-hmm.
there is no fairness, we need to speak about it and be really
Yes.
honest.
Yeah.
You know, need to be really honest about where the resources are going and why they're going that way and
Mm-hmm.
what fairness and unfairness is in certain situations. And I need to feel like I can be human. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's the key thing. And then you
Yep.
get the best out of people.
Exactly. So, Maria, I was wondering about these personal insights from what you do and how you integrate this approach to all of your life. So, how do you practice self-compassion and compassionate communication? So, what are some insights that you found? And I don't necessarily want to say tips or tricks, but what are things that we can start doing today to to practice this with ourselves and with others?
So number one is get support.
Mm-hmm.
Is getting support once my levels have risen. That's too late.
Yep.
It's like using thirst to
Mm-hmm.
determine that you're dehydrated. That's late, right?
Yep.
So having support and understanding and trusting that I want to be supported in my calm and beautiful state,
Mm-hmm.
not
Yep.
I only deserve support once things have escalated. That's
Mm-hmm.
really important. And where you're getting that support, and that support is compassionate and loving towards you, not
Mm-hmm.
teaching you how to be better, not stretching you or challenging you. That's a different type of training. That's not what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Silence and reflection.
Mm.
Really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
Really important to find moments of silence and reflection. There's a group of people near where I live, and I can't remember what their religion is called. But if you go to their building, they have something called the Global Spiritual University. And if you go to their building, every hour on the hour for 4 minutes comes this meditative music. And whatever you're engaged in, whatever you're doing, everybody just stops and reflects at the same time to realise how attached we get to things.
Yep.
That sends, that there's nothing to be attached to.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something about that silence and reflection and breathing.
Mm-hmm.
I do a practice where I practice trying to feel my heart beating in my body.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really nice one. Try to become really conscious. And, I talked about vibration and energy and the opening of intuition, which is, it's a learning journey. It's like, if you wanted to learn the piano or something, you have to learn the steps.
Yep.
But for me, opening intuition is a blessing because it's less stressful. I can remember that, there's the way I talk about intuition is it's like the cloud. All this universal knowledge in the cloud, and I need to learn how to stick my USB into it and download and remember that it isn't all on me.
Yep.
So those are the things that I do, and what I find is, and I don't get it right all the time, but the more I become in harmony with that, and I'm more recently practicing something called non-resistance.
Okay.
I get more done with less resources.
That's incredible. Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. So, Maria, our last question is two-parter, and this is the way that we end all of our communicative leader episodes. So it is thinking about, a pragmatic leadership or communication tip. It can be advice or a challenge. And the first part is that, what we want to leave our titled leaders with. And then the second part is kind of that advice or tip or challenge for employees of all ranks.
Thank you. So for titled leaders, I've got this lovely phrase that I borrowed from somewhere, but that I love using, and it's connection before correction. Connection before correction. And you'll never connect with anyone if you're not in a compassionate state. And only at the point of connection can we then start to address what are the things that we would like to be different. What needs to change and how, and what are the resources that we need to enact those changes. And alongside connection before correction, because misread, that can sound like, say hello, how are you, and then tell you what I want, The other thing is, if you go into anything in life with a single-minded purpose and you are not open to the fact that you are in a sea of other people who
Yeah.
may have other ideas, then you should expect conflict.
Yep. Yep.
And then on the other side, for employees everywhere, I like people to think about, a big thing in workplaces are power imbalances, and power imbalances exist. Okay. And that's usually around the weight of resources.
Yeah.
But the power imbalance only exists when the person with the least amount of power plays their part in the power relationship. So if I see you as having power over me, then I'm playing my role in the power relationship. If I understand you to be a human being trying to get a job done, and you might be doing it really badly, but it doesn't mean that I'm a lesser human being. I can still meet you as an equal in our humanity, as long as I'm not doing that out of defiance, retaliation, or resentment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really helpful reminder, because I think a lot of times people just assume this is the way it is. But when recognizing there's a choice, it can be really freeing.
So I have a lovely example of this in the prisons that I work in. And I train people to do the work I do. I train prisoners to work with prisoners who are struggling, to share compassionate communication.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And our team of facilitators are prisoners. And yet, time and time again, I have demonstrated how when the prisoners find that self-compassion, and therefore they're demonstrating something about care for everyone, including the officers, my facilitators end up sitting in senior management team meeting with the leaders of the prison to talk about what can make things better. And nobody believes
incredible. Yeah, that is phenomenal. And kudos to those leadership teams that say, wow, I can learn from you, and I don't understand this, and I need your help.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. There's so many examples of where this works. But it doesn't work if you treat it as a technique to get what you want.
Yeah.
That's just plain manipulative. And, this is about a journey of discovery. It's about a way of being in the world that is about making life more wonderful for yourself and everyone around you.
I love that, Maria. Well, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your perspective and your experiences. And you've left us with so many thoughtful, concrete things that we can start practicing today that are not only going to help make our workplace what we want it to be, because that's one of our goals here, but to make our lives what we want it to be. Well, thank you, Maria. I truly appreciate you.
Thank you. This has been really lovely. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the work you're doing.
All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on The Communicative Leader.